The Senior Rehab podcast is sponsored by Health IQ. Health IQ is a special rate life insurance company for health-conscious people like you and me. If you're in the market for life insurance to have peace of mind and to protect your family, I'd highly recommend checking out this company. They are the only life insurance company to use data to leverage lower life insurance rates for active individuals. So the result is that 56% of Health IQ customers save between 4 to 33% on their life insurance premiums, which can definitely add up to big savings over time. To find out more information, just go to healthiq.com/SRP to support the show and to get your free quote. Hit me!
This is a Senior Rehab podcast, the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
Hey, this is Nicole Nexon of the Senior Rehab podcast in a segment called State of the Sniff. And I'm here tonight with Emily Russell, and we're going to be talking about this article I found that you wrote, Emily, called Point of Service Documentation and Other Billable Service Myths. You wrote this in September of 2017, but I got to tell you, I have seen so much about productivity and the productivity requirements in almost every rehab group that I'm in on Facebook. And it's just a conversation that happens so often. I feel like it's still relevant and becoming maybe more so relevant and becoming even more so a necessary conversation that we have to have. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. And thank you for having me.
No problem. Thanks for agreeing. Tell me a little bit about yourself. You're a speech therapist, and how did you get into that?
Okay, so I took kind of a roundabout way to speech therapy. Along my academic route, I picked up a degree in political science, and then I got a master's degree in teaching English as a second language, and then I finally wound up in speech pathology. And the kind of funny thing about that is it was already on my mind, but what really sealed the deal for me was watching the movie The King's Speech, which is kind of silly, but I just thought, ooh, that's really, something I want to do. So, so that's how I wound up being a speech language pathologist and going to school for that.
How did you end up in geriatrics specifically? What drew you to it?
Well, in speech therapy, we have to complete kind of like clinical rotations, towards the end of our program. And I had initially thought that I would be in acute care all the way. I thought, oh, definitely, I'm going to wind up being in the hospital setting. But I wound up getting a SNF assignment, so skilled nursing, and it happened to be a facility that was specifically for dementia care. Okay. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. I would have never guessed, sometimes you just don't know what you're really going to be passionate about and what you're really going to like until it kind of happens. And, I never would have guessed that I would really just love working with geriatric patients, but I do. There's really my big passion.
Yeah, it's funny. I always thought when I was in PT school, I thought I was going to end up with like pediatrics or, like younger athletes. And I did a pediatrics rotation. And I was like, nope, this is not for me. Not at all. And then I worked in a hospital in DC for a little while, and it wasn't particularly a SNF, but it was joint replacements and some other things. And same thing. I was like, I really enjoy this. Like, I really enjoy this population. And then,
sometimes, things surprise you. And I've been working in geriatrics ever since my clinicals. So, but I have worked in some other settings, doing some work. I've worked in just about every medical setting now. But I still just keep coming back to working in SNFs because I really love it and I'm really passionate about it. And that's kind of why I'm so passionate about the issues that are occurring in the setting right now.
Yeah, I agree. I actually was an outpatient for a little while. And I left outpatient to come back to the SNF, and I got a lot of, all you're going to do is walk old people and wipe their butts. And I was like,
Thank you for that, right?
Yeah, and we're doing a lot of good things in there. So, like I said, I feel passionate about the things that are arising in here too, and I want to keep us like a good and strong community, because our patients
absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, because besides working in the SNF, which you said you're doing part-time or per diem, you also have created your own company. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I created the company AccuTreat, ACCUTX.net, if you want to take a peek at our website. I was working in the SNF at the time when I created AccuTreat, and it basically was the fruition of my frustration with how expensive and sometimes not even evidence-based some healthcare tools are. And, basically the clinicians, especially speech language pathologists, I can't speak to PTs and OTs, but we get almost no budget to buy anything for our therapy. So a lot of times things are coming out of our pocket, and certainly things that we recommend post-discharge, are coming out of our patient's pocket typically. So I really wanted to make a company that could provide and market tools. We used to do apps. We still do some apps. And other resources, not only just for clinicians, but also for patients, and make them based on evidence-based practice and make them affordable and accessible for everyone.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why this article. I noticed you have a blog on there, and most of your stuff is about speech-specific issues, but this seems to be kind of hitting across the board, SNF in general. And what made you decide to write this?
Well, I'm involved in a lot of forums on Facebook. I'm in one that's collaborative, which PTOT and speech, and all of our various assistants. And then, of course, in my own field specific speech forums. So I just, maybe it's that political science background in me. I don't know, but, it really just kind of strikes a nerve with me that, people are, for the most part, unknowingly doing things that they don't even realize are putting their licenses at risk, and that facilities are, basically shouldering that responsibility, shoveling it onto employees. And it's an issue I'm really passionate about. This productivity issue has become so widespread and such a huge problem, that we're seeing a mass exodus of professionals leaving the SNF, and where is that leaving our elders? Where our elders still need, skilled and high quality care. So something's got to change. Something's got to happen.
Yeah. And that's actually how I found your article, was in that collaborative PTOT SLP group, that you posted it. And I read it and I was like, yeah, this is a thing. And the whole thread leading up to the your article being put on there had me very concerned, because it was a bunch of therapists saying like, oh, this is why I left. This is why I left. This is why I left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People were basically saying they're just like struggling to get through the day to get this number of minutes. And, the whole point of the Senior Rehab Project is to really promote like evidence-based care. And
right.
How can I get people to worry about evidence-based care and want to go in that direction when they're just so worried about meeting a number?
Right.
It's probably limiting them from actually getting better outcomes, because they're so focused on this one particular thing that may not even be helping their patients, could actually be limiting their treatment options and limiting some of the things that they're doing.
Well, I think that's an especially poignant point, especially talking about point of care or point of service documentation. Employers want you to take off, the last 10 minutes, the last 5 minutes, whatever. Sometimes even people have set up to 15 minutes to complete your documentation when you're with the patient. For a speech pathologist, we typically have our sessions, they're 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes up to 60, but not as commonly. When you're taking away that much time from therapeutic service, you're not providing best care. And, as a side note, it's very specifically prohibited in the CMS RAI manual. So,
yeah. And good thing that you mentioned that, because I want to talk about that specifically. What I really enjoyed about this article was your links to things.
Yeah.
You put like a nice list together of things that CSM's RAI 3.0 manual says specifically is not allowable. And it's not even, you made a point to saying this is not your opinion or interpretation of the rules. This is exactly what is stated in the manual. So,
right.
So they're saying therapist time spent on documentation or on initial eval is not included in billable time.
Right.
Not even included. So if right there, if someone's telling you point of service, I mean, that's telling me that that's not even legal.
Right.
That's fraud right there if I'm billing for that. And as someone holds a license, that's worrisome because my building isn't going to get in trouble.
Right.
Because we have to take bi-yearly things on ethics, an ethics course. And they tell you, like, you cannot fall back on, oh, my boss told me to. It's your license. It's your decision.
Right.
Constantly. But we can, any reevaluations as part of the treatment process is billable. Family education conducted with the patient present is billable. Time required.
That's an important note. The patient has to be present.
Yes. Bring those patients with you. I know there's times that family members are like, I don't want them in here, but if you need to talk about something with the patient present, don't be afraid to fight for that. Because I've seen that times too. And if they don't want the family
right
there,
and also people always say, well, what about the time I spent educating the aides or the nurses or the dietitian or the chef? None of that counts. None of it can be billable.
And now a quick break to tell you about our sponsor. This episode of the Senior Rehab Podcast is sponsored by Health IQ. I mentioned before that Health IQ is a special rate life insurance company for health-conscious people like you and me. They have a unique mortality model on health-conscious people that allows them to secure lower rates based on actual data. You can think of it like good driver savings on auto insurance. They also have a unique underwriting process where instead of using common measurements like BMI, they use waist-to-hip ratios, cholesterol calculations, and much more to demonstrate a more accurate view of someone's health. So if you're in the market for life insurance to protect your family and have a little bit of peace of mind, I highly encourage you to go to healthiq.com/SRP to get your free quote and help support the show. Thanks.
Yeah. That's a crazy amount of time in your day.
Oh yeah.
That is a crazy amount of time in your day. And then further in your article, you talk about all the things that we have to do that are not permitted as billable minutes. And you say that, that's one of your big points right there. Anything educating other staff, educating families, all of those things, that's not billable, but that's skill. Because if we're not doing that,
right.
Is. And that I feel like is something that gets missed in this push for productivity, because these things that don't count as billable services are still important for patient care.
Absolutely.
Our documentation is still important for patient care. That's one of the most important things that you can do. Education of other staff, important for patient care. Consulting with the rest of your team, important. So how do you say, like, what would you tell a therapist who is trying to find this balance? They're getting this push on productivity, but there's all these things that are not productive. That is important. And how do we address that? And maybe as individuals, but maybe also as a profession, like how do we get back to the focus on actual patient care versus just making money?
Well, the way I see it, we have really, and I'm going to talk about as a profession first. So as a group of rehab professionals, so encompassing PTs, OTs, and speech pathologists, all of us all together, because we're all really in this together. This affects all of us. As a profession, people really are kind of at the point now where a lot of people agree with what is said in my article and, what's been kind of going around online about these things being unfair. And everybody's basically saying, well, what's next? What can we do? We see the problem, but now what do we do to try to change it? Well, some people have called for unionization. I can't say whether or not that's the answer at this point, but I can tell you that I've been looking into it, trying to see, what I can find out about that, if that would be, a good way to go. And then, there's also, trying to change things at the government level, trying to get things changed in Medicare, maybe trying to have them recognize that these unskilled services that we're providing are essential for patient care and for quality of care. So trying to change it on that level, it's sort of a chicken and the egg kind of situation. Are the facilities acting the way they're acting because of the way Medicare has aligned their reimbursement criteria, or, vice versa? So either we all need to band together as a profession and determine what we will and will not do and need to comply with it all together, and have some kind of unity as to what we will accept and what we will not accept. Or we can try to work on the government. But, working on the government is going to be a harder task, I think. Maybe a little harder than mobilizing as a profession. I'm not sure.
What do you think our role collectively as like our professional organizations? Like, do you think it needs to come from individual therapists? Do you think there needs to be like a push up from us on the ground? Do you think we should be drawing more on our professional organizations into this? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, we have been waiting for our professional organizations to step up and try to protect us and to work with the government to make regulations and to do things. I can't speak as to why exactly those things haven't happened. I do know that they kind of made a sort of loose statement about how productivity is not a good thing and, that they were not for it. But as far as kind of acting in a sense like a union, that's definitely not something that's happening. I can tell you that from my organization, that's not really something that they seem like they're able or willing to do at this point. So my sentiment is that it's something that kind of needs to be a ground roots kind of movement. And I think we all need to, as rehab professionals, kind of stand up for ourselves and say, hey, this is enough. We're not putting up with this anymore. And if we all do that as a collective, I think we'll see a lot of change. But that's the challenge, right? Trying to work as a collective.
That's always the challenge, I feel like. What do you say to the therapists who would say, well, healthcare is a business and we have to bring in money somehow. How am I still able to make the money it takes for my business to succeed and meet these recommendations and, stay within these guidelines ethically?
Well, I think that people have gotten kind of a skewed aspect of what kind of profitable margin that they can expect from these types of organizations. Right now, things are done in, I can't say all, but in a great deal of organizations are not necessarily being of the highest level of ethical behavior. And, profit margins obviously are affected by that. They're making more money, but they're making it on the backs of all of their therapists and other individuals who are putting themselves at risk. So I think there needs to be sort of a realignment of what is a reasonable profit margin. We need to, we're involved in healthcare. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about health and mortality. And, these bigger concepts than just the almighty dollar, if there shouldn't be, it's frustrating to think that we even have to think that way at all, that we have to think about, well, how can I, drain Mrs. Jones of all of her Medicare money, and still provide her with decent care, good enough care. So I can turn around and pay the bills next month and have some more money to go on vacation. It's a frustrating situation.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure. And I know we had spoken earlier, like about like personally how we feel about things, but I feel like me personally, I can't do point of service notes and provide quality patient care. I need to, if I'm really working with somebody, I need to be there to keep them safe and to challenge them. And I feel like I can't challenge somebody if I cannot give them my full attention and cannot be hands-on. For me, I mean, maybe sometimes we're doing so much like straight education that I could see that being the skill. You know, if I'm just focusing on patient education, that's one thing. But if I'm like writing the whole time, how much effort am I really putting in? I don't know. I find it very frustrating personally. I know I find it very frustrating personally when I'm at the doctor and there are signs that are telling me that it's rude to use my cell phone, and they're just like over their computer and they're not even making eye contact. Like, I find that so frustrating.
That's a really funny point. That's so true though.
Yeah, like I actually took a picture of one of my doctors, like over their computer typing with the sign over their head saying something about making eye contact. And I was like, hold up here. Like, I get that you're stressed. I know what's going on, but I feel like we can do better. I don't know how we do better. You know, I think that's the next question. And I think professionally, we all know we can do better, but how do we do it? I think is going to be the next big question that we all have to start tackling. And I feel like this was a good place. I feel like your article was a good place to give us somewhere to launch from and start the conversation, really.
Yeah. And, and I think in many ways, the conversation has kind of been started. I've seen a lot more posts on Facebook with at least my article help people know what Medicare actually says is billable versus unbillable, and that, I think that's been really helpful. And I see a lot more people not so much chiming in on how easy it is for them to make 90% productivity every day. I've seen a decrease in those kinds of posts, which is good to see. Yeah. So I think, first of all, maybe the first step and the easiest step is we need to educate ourselves. Don't rely on what your rehab director or, even sometimes what your colleagues, don't rely on them to tell you what is billable and what is not billable. We are all responsible for knowing the contents of, our billing practices, knowing what the RAI says. The responsibility ultimately falls on us as therapists. We can't just say, well, my boss told me that this was okay. That won't stand up in court.
That you might as well just like chuck your license out the window at that point. Like, oh, it's been fun having a career, but I'm done.
Right.
I'm done with this.
Yeah. And on that note too, your employer's not going to sit there and defend you and say, oh, but I told them it was okay. No. When it comes down to it, if there is some kind of infraction, you are ultimately responsible. No one else is going to have your back regarding this. So you need to be your own advocate.
Very true. Very true. And, I don't want to make it sound like it's like, I don't want to scare people away from, a skilled nursing facility either. Because both you and I have just like said earlier in our conversation that we both love it. It's something
absolutely.
That and I know that you feel the same. We just want to see these patients get the best care. And also we want to see our colleagues like grow and be as good as they can. Because there's a lot of talent out there. And there's a lot of people so willing to work. And I don't want to scare them off. Because I think this is an insurmountable amount of work that I have to do. And I'm just not even going to bother. That's what really bothers me most as a clinician is I don't want to see people getting pushed out from something they love and they're good at.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point, and I absolutely agree with you. I'm definitely not trying to persuade people to not get into skilled nursing. That's exactly the opposite of what I want to see happen. But that is something that you see on the forums. Oftentimes the first thing people say is, oh, well, that's why I left the SNF. I left it years ago and I don't look back, or I'm taking a job in the SNF. Oh, don't do that. Run away, And where does that leave our elders? Where does that leave our people, who desperately need skilled, experienced care, and that's why I'm so passionate about this topic. We have to change things. And unfortunately, what happens, it seems, is the people going into skilled nursing right now, a lot of times our new graduates, we don't learn these kinds of things in school. So in a sense, we're kind of unprepared, when we actually enter the workforce, and we're more susceptible when the boss says, oh, do, point of care documentation, do this, take 15 minutes of your last, your session and just write that up. And then, oh, you can count transfers. The second you leave the gym, start counting your minutes as you're walking towards your patient. That's fine. They're more susceptible to it because they just don't know yet, And then the unfortunate thing is then once they have the experience and they do know, then it becomes such a toxic kind of place that people just move on, and that's the real shame.
I think there's a fair amount of, I don't want to say this like in a bad way, but I think there's a fair amount in therapists of, because we're so used to kind of building bridges. I think there's a lot of therapists who are very much people who very much want to be, who are outgoing, who want people to like them, who want people to be on their team, that the idea of someone in power being angry with them, especially if you're new, is like a frightening thing, because that's not, I mean, they're in, I don't mean this to sound like a bad thing or that we're all pushovers, but I feel like there's enough therapists who are like very much like, I'm trying not to say people pleasers because that sounds bad, but like just want people to like them and are so used to building relationships that the idea of pushing back is almost a little bit scary. And like they don't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely not an easy conversation, and I would even go as far as to say that I'm not even 100% certain that a lot of our rehab directors and things like that they're not 100% solid on Medicare's guidelines either. At least I would like to give them that out anyway, just on the off chance. So, I mean, they could be talking from the regional, rehab director who could be talking from up higher somewhere else, so they could, it's possible that people could legitimately be telling people things that they think are true and just happen to not be. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Nobody, and I wouldn't say that it's just in rehab either. I mean, who wants their boss to hate them? It's kind of counterproductive to, like the work environment, but, that is a really hard thing. And that is what people do say, like, well, what can I do? What am I supposed to do? And people do seriously fear repercussion if they start to, rock the boat as it were, because people are seriously afraid that they will get fired, which is, by the way, technically illegal. However, it's not unknown for employers to fire you for, say, some other reason. But it could essentially be related to productivity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the fear of being fired, I think a lot of people are still coming from a place of maybe some financial instability. We're looking at people who have huge amounts of debt.
Right.
I mean, especially coming out of the doctorate programs now. I know that some of the younger therapists or therapy students that I've talked to, like the debt burden they have is unbelievable. And, I feel like you hear, out in public or whatever, like, oh, well, don't take on those things if you can't afford them. But
yeah,
how are you going to do these jobs? How are you going to do this like level of skilled work if you don't have the education to back you? Don't we want our healthcare to have that level of skill? I mean, I know I do.
Right.
I'm proud of my level of skill. And I know that a lot of the people that I work with are really bright people, really proud of the effort they've put in. But getting fired is scary. Because
of course it is.
Yeah. Writing on you.
And there are the, golden nuggets of skilled nursing kind of, around. And, there's not, and also for those of you who are new and are listening to this and are getting totally, freaked out about skilled nursing, there are still good facilities out there. Absolutely. But unfortunately, there's a very good number of not quite so good facilities out there too. So when you are going out there and you're interviewing for a job, ask these pertinent questions. What is your productivity level? If you don't meet productivity, what are the repercussions? Those kinds of things. Kind of get a feel for what their corporate culture is like. Yeah.
Like I said earlier, like I'm very lucky. I have like a boss or manager who really understands it. who really gets it, who's a great therapist herself. And
Mm-hmm.
like the culture in my clinic, in my department, really is like push for better patient care. Like is really a high level of care given there and a lot of pride in that. And I feel like you could find that in other places and it could be built in other places, but we have to feel a little bit stronger in ourselves to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and for those of us who are experienced, and we are in the SNF and we are fighting burnout and things from these issues, I really can't think of a better solution than just really trying to band together and trying to fight against these ridiculous productivity standards. If we all start refusing, they'll be left with no one that's willing to do it, Maybe we need to have more outreach to universities and have students get educated regarding, billing practices and ethics in various settings, so our new graduates aren't so susceptible and vulnerable.
Yeah. I agree. I think we got to start maybe somewhere before all this, before it gets to like a really bad place, nip it in the bud. All right. So Emily, one last thing I want to touch on. We are going to go back to money again, because earlier in our conversation before we started recording, you did mention that you do own, besides this business of the AccuTreat, you also have your own clinic that you've started. So tell me all about that, about what you look for in your productivity for yourself, how you meet your bills and still give good care on a personal level. Like, what do you see in your own business?
So, yes. So in addition to AccuTreat, we just recently opened the Toledo Speech and Stuttering Clinic. And right now we are focusing on providing expert instruction on stuttering treatment. So that's kind of one of our things. But we are also kind of going against the insurance model. We are kind of setting off by ourselves, and we will take insurance and help you get reimbursement if you can get reimbursed, which a lot of people can't. Little known fact, apparently stuttering is not reimbursed by insurances very often, which is just crazy to me. But so a lot of these people, really benefit from a longer term therapy, and they're being told that they have to pay completely out of pocket, which is financially ruinous for most people. So at my company, we have decided to really look at our margins and determine, how much do we really need in order to keep our office space that we've rented, have our expert instruction. And when I say expert instruction, this is a speech therapist who is not only a person who stutters himself, but is also a professor at a university here and really has devoted his entire life to stuttering. So when you see him, you're seeing a specialist in your particular disorder.
Awesome.
So very high quality therapy going on. So, we simply really kind of fantastically, we found that if we have just only 5 patients a week at the rate that we are charging, and I'll go ahead and say what rate we're charging, we're only charging $60 for an hour-long session, which is, at least in Ohio, that's a pretty good rate. Most places around here are about triple that for a private pay session.
Wow.
Okay. We're also trying to do bundling payments, so you can get 5 sessions for each session costing $55, and then so forth. If you get 10, it's $50, etc. But I want to point out that we've been in business for the clinic actually has been open for 2 weeks, and we've already managed to secure at least the next couple months' rent on top of probably our yearly costs. So it's absolutely possible. I know because we're doing it. Maybe operating outside of insurance is a possible solution. I know that there are cooperatives happening with doctors. Doctors are just as frustrated on this topic as we are. There are organizations out there where you can pay a monthly fee and you have unlimited access to physician services. So and it's not insurance based. So something like that. And there's even I just read an interesting article about hospitals that are making their own like saline solutions and things like that to try to get away from drug manufacturers and the insane costs that they charge. So it's really interesting to me that people are taking things kind of into their own hands. Me with AccuTreat taking, apps and tools and continuing ed and everything and trying to, offer it outside of the system. And then these doctors trying to go outside of the system. Maybe we can all start our own system.
And that may be it. I mean, who knows what the future holds for us, because I feel like I listen to these conversations and I feel like things are untenable the way they are. And, it's hard. It's hard to hear people like with so much frustration and so much disgust with something that you hold so dear and that is so valuable.
Right. And, my advice to people who are sitting there, hashing it out day after day in the SNF, keep your focus not on the productivity numbers. Keep them where they should be. Those patients, the patients that we love, we get to know them, their life stories, their histories. Our elderly are so incredibly valuable. I can't tell you how many stories and the wonderful feeling of being let into their lives and helping them achieve a goal, maintain their independence, regain their independence, all kinds of things, these life-changing things and this enhancement of quality of life. That's what makes skilled nursing such a fabulous setting and why I can never leave it completely, because I love it so much. And I can't stress enough to those of you thinking of getting out of the system completely, leaving skilled nursing altogether, please reconsider. If you really still love your geriatric people, try to find either another facility, try to find a way to further conversation with your directors of rehab, try to forge some kind of forward path than just leaving, because our elders deserve better. They deserve our care. And I really feel passionately about that.
I don't think I could say anything better. Like, I think you just summed it up perfectly. Like, so many things I feel, and I feel like so many people in our field feel, it's a gift to be given this and like to be allowed into these people's lives. And yeah,
I mean, these elderly people, they just have my heart, and that's why we get so frustrated and why we get so burnt out, because that is where our hearts are. We just need to find a way to fix the problem. And fixing the problem is certainly not running away from it. So we need to figure out some other way.
Amen. Emily Russell, thank you so much. I feel so lucky that I was able to have this conversation with you. And like I said, this is my maiden voyage. This is the first episode that I'm going to get produced. So I'm really excited.
Well, yay. Well done.
Thank you. And good luck in everything that you're doing. And you said you're working on a PhD as well. So
I am.
And good luck with your clinic. Like, please let us know how it all goes. And I don't have any patients in Ohio, so I can't tell anyone, but if you want to give a quick shout out to your clinic in case anyone in Ohio is listening and has a stuttering issue or some other speech things that they would like to address.
Well, sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So my company, once again, is called AccuTreat. That's ACCUTX.net. And on there, you will find our various therapy tools and apps that we offer. We also offer online CEUs, again, at a very affordable price, trying to be accessible. We also just opened up our new clinic, like you mentioned. It's called the Toledo Speech and Stuttering Clinic. And you can also find that information on our website. So really exciting things happening for us. And I'm excited to have been a part of your podcast. And I think that what you're doing with Senior Rehab Project is really great. And I can't wait to collaborate more with you from a speech therapy perspective. So
yes, fantastic. So again, thank you everyone for listening. This is Nicole Nexon and the State of the SNF, part of the Senior Rehab Project.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you only listen to these podcast episodes, you are missing out on 90% of the Senior Rehab Project. Hop on over to seniorrehabproject.com where you can join the movement that's advancing care for older adults. You can join for free or become a part of the Game Changers, where you can get some free gear and access to our monthly meetup. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com. I appreciate y'all, and I'll talk with you soon. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky.